The drag nuns. Can you believe we're in season 3? 2 years.
Woohoo!
And we're still pants.
That's not true. We have improved since season 1. We got microphones, we got HD recording.
Oh yeah.
Makeup skills and mascots and a website.
And you can see the faces in higher def. Whether or not you like them is another matter.
Well, if you don't, you can shut the fuck up, people. We're beautiful.
Everyone wants to look like us. Surely.
The world would be pretty fabulous then. Oh my god, seriously. Well, come on, I've turned you off and on.
Sister Iva says that's not technically correct. You've only turned her on.
Well, I live to please.
Hello, I'm Sister Alaska Lots.
And I'm Sister Babeushka.
And this is Utter Nunsense.
The show where we pour a cup of piping hot.
Do you like some tea? And we utter whatever nonsense pops into our heads.
As you should very well bloody know by now, this is a laid-back chat amongst very good friends here.
And we release a brand new episode once a month, every month on the first of the month. So make sure you like and subscribe and hit the bell notification so you get notified of new episodes when they appear.
And also, it's a podcast on all good podcasting sites. So make sure to listen and leave us a review.
We have rolled again once around to February, which is, of course, UK LGBTQ plus History Month. And we are here with more exciting, fabulous, unbelievable stories from times of old about amazing queer people.
That's what we want. We want more queer history, damn it. And more queer history we're gonna have.
Genuinely, like, I just love history in general, and I love coming across different queer stories, which have often been buried for so long, and then we're only now uncovering them again, and they're just fantastic.
It's really nice to have people to actually look back to and go, yeah, they lived their best life. Why can't I?
And they just lived defiantly as their true selves. It's incredible.
So yeah, we need more queer heroes.
We're excited about that. Let's buck the system.
For our first queer history story, I've picked a very special one. And it's quite special because it's also maybe not very remarkable. Not remarkable. Nobody's ever special. Fuck everyone.
You're really selling it. I can't wait.
I know, no. The first story I have for queer history is about Juan José Cabezuro. And I'm going to fuck up the pronunciation every time because that's how I roll on this channel. So Juan was a Peruvian chef and street food vendor from the first half of the 19th century who happened to be a homosexual. There's not much known about his early life, as a lot of the history is actually focused on his career, as well as his personality and his sexuality, because everyone loves a good story about the queers.
We certainly do.
So Juan was a chef. His food stalls were very popular and well known at Lima at the time, meaning he was quite commercially successful. The problem being that he did really like to try his luck at Chavalos Spa, where he would gamble quite a bit.
Tisk.
It did mean that he actually ended up dying quite poor because he wasted all his money.
Really?
Even though he was a successful entrepreneur.
Now there's a life lesson for you.
Don't gamble, kids, unless you're sure to win. The city he was in, Lima, the capital of Peru, was seen as a place where you could actually lead a comparatively open life as a gay man.
How forward thinking.
Yeah, that is the very short story I wanted to share. And the reason I shared it was because, well, when I was looking through queer history this time, I thought it would be nice to just include one that's almost nothing to do with his sexuality as such. You know, he lived a life, he was successful, you know, there were no scandals, there were no triumphs in equality. It was more that he was just a person who happened to be queer, who lived his life did his thing, and many of us in life will probably be that person. It was noted he was queer, but it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, I think that's really important, actually. When you think about media that features queer people, when they write in storylines, for example, they write in a trans person, they have to make it tragic. They have these hardships. They're pretty much guaranteed to die at the end. It's never just that they're a person living their life who just happens to be queer. It's quite refreshing when you do get stories where it's just an incidental, but it's not actually the whole center of the story. It feels like more authentic representation.
Yeah, I agree. It was nice to have something that was almost just slice of life in terms of queer history, which I thought it would be quite a nice little, just a nice little pebble to throw out there for the queer community, that you can just have a normal life. Most of our lives are probably not going to be remarked by historians, or at least I know mine won't be. Not that remarkable.
Well, that's going to contrast quite strongly against the next story. I'm on a mission to find the most wild stories that I can.
So wild, I've been blasted by radiation.
I also decided to go for a story which was really human and down to earth. And so I picked pirates.
Land ho!
Who are you calling a hoe?
Joan.
So for this tale, we are going to take you on a journey back to the golden age of piracy, back in the 17th and early 18th centuries. And at that time, it was estimated there was more than 5,000 pirates at sea. It's a lot.
Impressive.
And some of those pirates were kind of gay. Shiver me timbers. And so today I would like to tell you about two of my favourite queer pirates. That's right, this is a buy one, get one free. Anne Bonny and Mark Reed. We're going to start with Anne, and she first appears in the history books back in 1710 as a rowdy 13-year-old tomboy. We're off to a good start. She was described as being a strapping girl, and she had a fierce temper. In fact, this is why she appears in the history books this time. She lost her temper, and at this tender young age, she accidentally killed her English maidservant with a knife in a fit of rage.
Happens to all of us, I'm sure, at some point.
Just a wee whoopsie. You may think that she might have mellowed with age, but no. She appears in the history books again at the age of 18 when she hospitalised a would-be suitor for a month after she beat him with a chair.
Oh dear.
It escalates from there because eventually her father decided to disinherit her, and she reacted by attempting to murder him, burning down his plantation, eloping with a man, and then promptly ditching the man to join up with pirates. That, my friends, is how you do a teenage rebellion.
I mean, if your family's disinheriting you, you may as well burn those bridges yourself.
And this is where the fun really starts. Like, there are some unbelievable tales of her exploits, which were often carried out with the help of her gay best pal. And forgive the archaic language, it appears he was known as Pierre the Pansy Pirate.
A good use of alliteration, I suppose.
So not only was Pierre a pirate, but on the side, he also ran a coffee shop, a hairdressing business, and a dressmaking shop.
Entrepreneurial.
There's one story that talks about them scaring the absolute bejesus out of a ship by popping one of his gowns on one of his dressmaker's dummies, slathering it with pig's blood, and then rowing it out to the ship with an axe-wielding Anne standing over it looking particularly bloodthirsty. People in the boat were so scared by this, they literally just handed everything over and I just take it. There's another story that says they managed to avoid turning themselves into authorities by simply charging through the blockade in the harbour. And as they sailed by, there was Anne standing proudly on the ship, stripped to the waist, wearing nothing but a fabulous pair of black velvet trousers that Bestie Pierre had designed for her, with one hand resting on her hilt of their sword and the other waving a scarf at a rather astonished governor.
Now that is an exit.
They were obviously having the time of their lives. So, along with the many interesting characters that she rubbed shoulders with through her life, one of the people that she came across was our second pirate of interest, who is Mark Reed. Now, Mark was a very different character to Anne. He had been an army man, and he later settled down, got married, opened 3 inns. Seems like a fairly stand-up guy. Sadly, though, his marriage failed and his business has ultimately failed as well. He then decided to sign up to the crew of a merchant ship, trying his best to pick up the pieces and move on with life. That is until the ship was captured by pirates.
Oh no! This guy has no bloody luck whatsoever.
You can either beat him or join him. Guess what she chose?
Oh my.
And so he met Anne, and the two very quickly became inseparable. They ended up serving on the same ship together. The captain of their ship, Calico Jack, was so jealous with their intimacy that it eventually all came to a head, and he burst into Anne's cabin to confront her because he kind of had a thing for her. Only he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Anne, and beneath her, splayed across the bed, was a rather naked Mark, with a distinct lack of eggplant emoji down below. That's right, folks. We have lesbian pirates.
Oh my god, this is amazing!
I think, to be fair, both of them did have relationships with men, I think, at different times. But the pair of them had this amazing connection. So this is a true love story, albeit with a bit of blood and violence on the side.
The best kind of love story.
After this discovery, Mark started going by his birth name, which was Mary. But he did continue to wear a mix of masculine and feminine clothing and appeared to do so openly. And there's no mention of it causing any problems. Like, people were just kind of cool with it.
I mean, if you're robbing boats and pillaging villages, you've got to have some freedom to be who you are, right?
Together, they became infamous, powerful pirate leaders, and they ended up commanding a ship together as well. The kind of end of the story is that they were ultimately captured, perhaps unsurprisingly. They were put on trial and they were sentenced to death. However, they were both pardoned because they both claimed to be with child, despite totally sleeping with each other. And at that time, it was felt it would be wrong to harm an unborn child. They were spared their lives. Unfortunately, Mary contracted a fever in prison and died later as a result. And after that, Anne simply disappears from the record. It's almost as if one couldn't exist without the other. There is one story that Anne ends up in a nunnery. I'm not sure how true that is, but it is one of the many tales out there about what happened to Anne.
I somehow feel Anne would have made a fabulous drag nun. Just saying.
Both our pirates did have relationships with men, but ultimately they were fairly dismissive of any of their kind of temporary male lovers. And they were very obviously very deeply in love with each other. The ultimate pirate power couple.
I concur.
You got all of this story.
There's so much drama and intrigue, hidden identities, like fabulous plans to rob people, the fact that there's scandal if they're pregnant or not, escaping prison, unfortunately one dying, disappearing into history, never to be seen again.
As I said, just a simple down-to-earth story again.
Super salt of the earth, or salt of the sea.
Oh! It was a time when being gay was illegal, but since pirates were quite happy operating outside of the law, I don't suppose it really bothered them that it was illegal.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was maybe quite a few queer pirates who decided, fuck the system. I do always appreciate your down-to-earth stories, Alaska. Very, very true and resonates with us even to this day, I feel, in our daily lives. For the next story, I'm going to take us back to the swinging time of the blues, where we're going to talk about Gladys Bentley.
Tell us about Gladys Bentley.
She was known for her raunchy lyrics to popular tunes, while also being a black lesbian cross-dressing performer.
She honestly already sounds like my kind of person.
Gladys, born at the start of the 1900s in Philadelphia, didn't have a particularly great start to life with her family. Her mother was quite estranged from her in the sense that she desperately wanted a boy, but she got a girl, and like some parents, couldn't make do with the fact that you have to raise your kid no matter what you get, because them's the breaks. So early on, Gladys was fighting against not the Germans.
Single-handedly took down Hitler. She just gets better and better.
Early on in life, Gladys started to push against the gender normative behaviour of the time, as she was larger in size, and so she did prefer to wear her brother's suits instead of dresses or blouses, which did lead to a lot of teasing, not just from classmates in her school, but also from her own family.
Ooh.
With this behaviour, her family did the normal thing that any loving and caring family would do. They would say that's abnormal and unladylike, and they would call the doctor to try and sort out whatever issues you were having.
Why? Why? What is so hard about just loving your children? If you don't want to have gay kids, don't have kids. Like, if you choose to have them, it's your job to love them. Just love them. It's okay.
Some people are clearly not aware that they're not creating a clone that they can mold however they want. They're creating another individual person with their own thoughts, feelings, and lifestyle.
Oh, that hit deep.
So unsurprisingly, Gladys decided, fuck this, and she ran away from home at 16 to begin her life in New York City.
Got our pirate running away. My next door is going to run away. You got to do what you got to do to keep yourself safe, folks.
Very true. So, Gladys moves to the big city and moves into the Harlem neighborhood and soon hears about one of the most notorious gay speakeasies that needed a male pianist.
They specified a man?
They specified a male pianist.
Boo!
Exactly. But that wasn't going to stop Gladys. So, she started performing man's clothing.
I like her.
Her favourite signature look was a nice tailcoat and top hat, but she would also don the full dress shirt, stiff collars, the bow ties, the Eton jackets, all of it, the whole shebang. She would do it just to get this job.
Wow, that's some pizzazz there.
Nothing was going to stand in her way. And so, her career quickly skyrocketed in the 1920s. And then, in the 30s, she was soon headlining at Harlem's Ubangi Club with a chorus of drag queens behind her.
She just keep getting better.
And it was especially interesting because her performances were described as very comical, sweet, but also very risque. Her vocal styling was quite deep and booming, with the use of growling sometimes, and she could also hit those high notes. But the key part to her performance was in her music. She would call out men. She openly sang about sexual relationships. She often sang about sissies and bull daggers. She sang through innuendo, or sometimes quite literally, about her female lovers. And she would even flirt with the women in the audience.
Nice.
She was openly proud about who she was. After having spent 16 years at home being stifled, she was out there and ready to live her open life.
I like how you've balanced the salt of the earth person with the most fabulous person you can find.
One of the highlights of her career was she once received so many complaints about her raunchy performances that the police ended up locking the doors of the place she was performing in to stop people being exposed to this audacious performance.
So did they lock everyone out, or were some people locked in? Like, you're forced to keep watching the audacious performance.
I would like to believe that some people were locked in to keep enjoying the experience.
You've started, you must see it through to the end.
It doesn't end on a high for Gladys, unfortunately.
And you built me up. I was so happy for her.
Unfortunately, Gladys did at times have to start carrying a special permit to allow her to perform in men's clothing, and was frequently harassed for even doing so. Although she was openly lesbian and she had quite a few lovers and she'd sing about it quite openly, as the US started to go into the McCarthy era, she did start to wear more dresses. And unfortunately, she did have to start limiting who she was due to the political climate, because she then ends up marrying, within 5 months of meeting him, Charles Roberts. So she decides to marry a man at the end of the day because those are the ways that the era is going and pushing people towards. In her later life, she would even claim that she had been cured by taking female hormones and stated she'd undergone an operation which helped change her life again.
It's like she just edged back into the closet until she was just fully in there and shut the door. How sad that the pressures of society ultimately made her feel that she couldn't be herself.
It's quite disappointing.
She at least got a taste of being herself and being free.
And I suppose it highlights again when we have, oppressive governments looking to limit people's way of living, how that can drastically impact how somebody lives and obviously lead them to maybe not living their authentic self. And it's something to always keep in our minds when dealing with the political systems, because as we've seen, we can go backwards as well as forwards. And so we wouldn't ever want to repeat what Gladys had to repeat, in which having to almost go back in the closet after being so open and free for 2 or 3 decades.
This is going to sound like a slight tangent, but it reminds me slightly of when they stopped forcing left-handed people to be right-handed, when it was finally allowed, and there was a sudden spike in the number of people who were left-handed, and people were like, why are we suddenly getting so many left-handed people? And you go, well, maybe they just felt they had to hide before. And if you make it not illegal, then people will just be themselves. And unfortunately, it works the other way too. If you restrict down and make things illegal and ban things, then people just go back into hiding. But it doesn't stop them being left-handed, and it doesn't stop them being queer.
Yes, well said, Alaska.
My next story is also very down to earth.
Oh, I can't wait.
I have included someone who has a disability because I thought that was a kind of representation that we didn't include last time.
Fair, fair.
All right. For our next fabulous story of queerness, we have a story about Seattle's very first unapologetically gay establishment, which was a 1970s bar called Shelley's Leg. Before we talk about the name, because what a name, I want to talk about what made this bar different from any other bar. And it's the fact that it was so visible. It was only a few years before that the Stonewall riots happened. And so it was a time when queer establishments were still very much hidden away down back streets, nothing obvious, trying to stay out of the public eye. When people walked through the front door of Shelley's Leg, the first thing they saw was a gigantic sign that read, Shelley's Leg is, capital letters, a gay bar.
Nice.
For Seattle's gay community and their guests. And it was right there in your face as soon as you walked in.
Now that is out and proud.
And this place was immensely popular. The line to get in would literally wrap all the way around the block. And if you were cool enough, you could get entrance through the back door, no pun intended, which was manned by a bouncer who had a list of names. So you were either on the list or you weren't if you wanted the back door access. But of course, you're not here to listen to me talk about a bar. You want to know about the name. Let me tell you that yes, the bar was named after a person's leg, a real person and a real leg. It was actually named after the owner's leg. So her name was Shelley Bauman, and she was a teenage runaway exotic dancer. Lots of runaways in our stories.
I know, I was going to say, like, that's now 3 in a row where they've all run away from home. I wonder what's going wrong in parenting in the world.
Anyway, so she travelled around supporting herself through her exotic dancing. And eventually, at the age of 20, she ended up in Seattle. And there she met some people, made friends, and moved into a house with them.
A gay house?
A gay
Of gay people?
Of gay people. It was about a year and a half after she first arrived in Seattle that she decided to go to Seattle's very first Bastille Day parade. And there she experienced a life-changing event that inspired the name of her bar. And I can't believe I'm about to say these words.
Oh, I can't wait. Come on, you're keeping us all in suspense.
Brace yourselves. Freak confetti cannon accident. Basically, one of the floats in the parade had this antique cannon, and they had set it up to shout.
Boom!
They had set it up to shoot confetti over the crowds, and apparently people were loving it. Unfortunately, people were also a little bit boisterous at this parade, so people were clambering all over the cannon. And because it was like pointed up into the sky, they were like pouring drinks down the barrel. And that barrel, which had been pointed up, ended up pointing further and further down until eventually it was pointed directly at the crowds.
Oh, fuck.
And she noticed the cannon pointing into the crowd at her. And she turned to her friends and said, I think we should move. And it was too late because the cannon fired.
Oh.
All that alcohol that had been poured down it turned that confetti into a congealed mass, which was shot directly at Shelley herself. She came to line in the streets, and her recollection is that she reached down to try and like move her jacket, and her hand went straight through her side to the pavement. Her injuries were devastating. Luckily, there was a doctor in the crowd. He realised that she had a severed artery, and he reached into her abdomen, found the artery, and clamped it shut with his hands.
Like, good on him, but oh, that sounds painful.
He kept her alive long enough for an ambulance to arrive and take her to the hospital. Now, you're probably wondering, how does this come into the name of the bar? Like, what? So when she got to the hospital, she was really close to death, and they determined that in order to save her life, they needed to amputate one of her legs, and they had to remove part of her pelvis and part of her small intestine. She actually spent 9 months recovering, and she ended up in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. However, she went on to sue the parade sponsors, the man who provided the cannon, and the city for ignoring the fact there was a loaded weapon at a public event. Won $330,000.
I mean, I don't know if I'd want to go through the experience, but I'm glad she was awarded a good amount of money for gross negligence. Jeez.
And so Shelley, now armed with a rather nice settlement, and still a bit of a party girl, despite being in a wheelchair, decided that she was going to use that money to open a disco with her friends. Now, apparently they had some trouble coming up with the right name for this club that they wanted to open until an LSD-fueled evening. They decided to immortalize what had earned them the money to open their disco, which was Shelley's leg.
Oh, that's a macabre way of getting a club opened, isn't it?
I mean, she's such an interesting character. She herself was not actually queer, but she used the money from her settlement, fought through her disability to open one of the most legendary gay clubs in Seattle for her friends.
Shelley, I raise a drink to you myself.
That's an ally there.
That is just amazing.
I love some of the down-to-earth stories about her as well. She was known for pausing movies on close-ups of Val Kilmer. Apparently, she had a real penchant for fancy shoes, even though she only had 1 foot. And she was a notorious party girl and would keep her friends awake at night and kick anyone who got in her way from her wheelchair because she still wanted to party.
Oh, she sounds like the life of the party. She would have been great to have around.
There you go. That is the tale of Shelley's leg.
It's really nice to have another part of diversity included, and also to include something of really key allyship.
Queer history is not necessarily just about the queer people themselves, but also the people who make space for queer people to exist. They are equally important, and Shelley was definitely one of those people.
And that's just so amazing. And as well as establishing such an amazing place for queer people to be themselves and feel safe in, I feel the city would have also learned not to have any more live cannons at events without a lot of safety. Oh, to Shelley, next time I'm out clubbing, I will raise a drink to you, and I will kick anyone that gets in my fucking way to the dance floor as well. I'm gonna take us back to the Mexican Revolution.
I know nothing about Mexican revolutions. Tell us more.
We're going to talk about Emilio Robles Avila.
I like how you've picked all the names that are difficult to pronounce.
Every fucking year. Emilio Robles Avila was a colonel during the Mexican Revolution who is claimed to actually be the first trans soldier in the Mexican military history.
Oh, he sounds interesting.
They were assigned female at birth, but from a very young age, Robles showed an interest in masculine activities such as learning to tame horses, handling weapons, and becoming an excellent marksman. Typical childhood stuff.
Yet another down-to-earth person that we can all relate to.
In 1911, they joined the army, and then after 2 years in service, they actually decided to start dressing as a man. And they had actually then demanded from people that they knew to address them as a man. That is how they're going to live. Now, Robles wasn't doing this because adopting a male identity was a survival strategy in terms of joining the army and having to pretend to be a man. They were actually doing it because they had a really strong desire to be male. And so that is how they identified, and they wanted other people to address them as such. Robles' male identity was accepted by family, who had all been raised as Catholic, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Very progressive.
Good family. That's how it's done.
No runaways this time. It's also accepted by the army and society, and even the Mexican government would choose to recognize Robles as male, as they had requested.
That's incredible.
And so it meant that they actually got to live their life from the age of 24 until they died at the ripe old age of 95 as their actual gender that they identified with.
Got to be honest, I was half expecting you to say they lived from 24 until they died at the age of 25.
No, they got a good 71 years after all this.
Nice.
It did mean that from 1913 to 1918, Robles was fighting as El Coronel Robles, and eventually gained the respect of peers and was seen as a capable military leader and eventually given their own command. So they were very effective as a military colonel.
My goodness. And people just respected them and who they were.
Robles was not to be fucked with. And not just as a military man, but one story is, according to a former neighbour, if anyone called Robles a woman or donna, he would threaten them with a pistol.
It's so rude. Honestly, how do you expect someone to react? I mean, maybe not with a pistol, but expect people to be angry if you disrespect them.
A group of grown men were said to have attacked him, wanting to reveal his anatomy, where he then ended up killing 2 of them in self-defense.
If you attack someone, expect them to defend themselves. Honestly, he sounds like he was just going to stand up for himself no matter what.
Do not fuck with the trans colonel of Mexico. During his life in the 1930s, Robles met Angela Torres, who he later married, and they even adopted a daughter together.
It's almost unbelievable that he could live such a full, open life and be accepted by the majority of the community around him. That's amazing.
And in the 1970s, the Mexican Secretary of National Defense even recognized Robles as a veteran of the revolution And he was then receiving for the next decade various decorations for their distinguished military career. So not only were they allowed to live their true self, but they were recognized for it. They weren't hidden away from it. It was something that was noted and respected in society.
Clearly quite a remarkable man, actually.
Sadly, they did pass away in December of 1984 at the ripe old age of 95, so fair play to them. And it is at this point again where we see a little bit of trans erasure trying to take place, because there were two suspicious requests that were claimed to have been made on his deathbed: to receive honours for his military service and to be dressed as a woman in order to commend his soul to God. The reason that these were quite suspicious at the time was because Robles had received several military honours throughout his life, and his death certificate had noted that he had actually lost the ability to speak for more than a year before his actual passing.
Oh! Someone is at it!
Obvious lie is obvious.
Really nice that, again, that the story has survived in history, despite potential attempts at erasure there.
Nice to have quite an openly proud trans person, especially with what we're seeing in the UK at the moment with the debate about trans people and their existence. So maybe we just need to let trans people pick up pistols and sort it out.
Let's not introduce guns in the UK. We quite like not having guns. Thank you. Next. Unsurprisingly, my final story is going to be from ancient Egypt. I did one last time. I'm doing one again this time. Out of all history, I find ancient Egyptian history just the most fascinating. It's a real area of passion for me. So I have yet another queer story from ancient Egypt. For this one, though, rather than talking about female kings, I would like to talk about a discovery that was made in 1964 in the Saqqara Desert in Egypt. And it was a 5th dynasty tomb that contained a fascinating secret.
What was it? We're waiting on tenterhooks.
This tomb housed the remains of 2 people. One of them was called Nyankuknum, and the other one was called Khnumhotep. And I can say ancient Egyptian names. And they were both royal manicurists. So they were fairly privileged people in society with high up positions. Hence the reason they ended up with quite a large fancy tomb. These men were among the privileged few people who were actually permitted to touch the pharaoh. And the big debate amongst Egyptologists is, what was their relationship? Whoa.
Were they good friends?
Sadly, there's no text in the tomb that explicitly defines the relationship between these 2 men. The hieroglyphs simply describe them as royal confidants and talks about their positions in society. But where the text is lacking, the iconography in the tomb is absolutely fascinating. There are many depictions of these 2 men throughout their tomb, and it includes depictions of things like them embracing, holding hands, and even potentially kissing. Oh,
Scandalous!
I know! Scenes and poses like these are actually common in ancient Egyptian tombs, but normally they depict a husband and a wife rather than 2 men. There's one particularly striking portrayal in which the 2 are embracing each other with their noses touching. And this was the most intimate pose that was actually allowed in canonical Egyptian art. I think it speaks volumes about the relationship between these 2.
So, just out of curiosity then, there's never been any other tombs where friends have been depicted in such a way, has there, from your knowledge?
This is really quite unique, this example. Now, homosexuality itself wasn't necessarily uncommon in ancient Egypt. Images like these certainly are unusual. I do want to make a very slight side note at this point to say another thing that people may not know is that ancient Egypt is known to have recognized 3 genders. Ah, there you go. Inscribed pottery shards from the Middle Kingdom found near ancient Thebes lists 3 genders. In the Egyptian, it's Tai, Sekhet, and Hemet. Tai means male and Hemet means female, but you've got this third one, Sekhet, and it was often translated by Egyptologists back in the day as eunuch, but there is no evidence that these individuals were castrated in any way. It's simply people trying to guess, what does this mean?
Or almost another little bit of erasure of queer history.
There is also another word which is very similar to the word for female. So the word for female was hemet, and there's another word which is hem, which appears to have the same meaning as sekhet. So it's this word that was still interpreted as eunuch, but is very closely aligned to the word for female. And for anyone who actually knows their hieroglyphs, it's different to the word hem for priest. It's depicted differently. So sounds the same, but it's a different word. Anyway, so clearly there's some acceptance of different genders, which may be perceived differently from how we do today, and potentially some acceptance of homosexuality as well. And hence you have these 2 very privileged men very visibly depicted in a fabulous tomb, which would have been signed off by the pharaoh. So presumably he approved.
Obviously, we can't say it's definitely confirmed, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say this damn gay relationship.
It certainly seems it, doesn't it? What's even more interesting is that the position of Khnumhotep in many of these scenes places him in the positions that are normally reserved for women. For example, in one scene, he's shown smelling a lotus, which makes him one of only 3 men ever discovered in scenes like this to be shown doing so in a tomb from the 5th dynasty. So it's really, really unusual.
Wow.
I'm going to temper it slightly by saying that they did have wives, which has made many Egyptologists to conclude that they were just siblings who were very close.
Don't know if I've ever been that close with mine, but okay.
But the repeated depictions of these 2 men being so intimate and embracing, and not necessarily depictions of them doing that with their wives. And so this is why they're often thought of as one of the first ever recorded same-sex couples in history.
That's really interesting to see that even from that long ago, we've had queer relationships, even though people have tried to erase those parts of our history.
2 men of equal social standing being buried together in the same tomb, despite the fact they were married to women, is unique. So there is no other example like this. And as I mentioned, the fact that this was one of the largest and most beautifully decorated tombs in the Saqqara necropolis suggests that whatever the nature of the relationship was, the pharaoh approved of it, because tombs of this caliber were like astronomically expensive.
Wow, I mean, I can understand why it might have thrown archaeologists for a bit of a loop when first discovered then, if it's so almost like unheard of and unique compared to anything else they might have been able to access before.
I think there's a tendency in history to say they were just very good friends. They were roommates. And in this case, well, they were brothers. Yes. However, I have one parting thing to leave you with, which is what they had inscribed over the entrance of their tomb. Something that I believe was unambiguously clear.
Was it, we'll meet over at Shelley's leg later?
How did you know? They had an inscription above the door which had their names intermingled. And in ancient Egypt, what this meant was that they are joined in life and in death.
There is no way that's not a gay relationship.
Together forever. It's true love.
The original Brangelina.
They were.
Oh, that is a very wholesome story, and so obviously a gay relationship from everything you've said.
Nearly.
God, historians always trying to erase queer history.
They seem to live a pretty good life.
I mean, hanging out with a pharaoh, getting a tomb approved by him.
Getting to touch him.
Kinky. Those have been some interesting, heartwarming, and also slightly questionable parts of queer history.
That's what we're here to provide. So we hope you enjoyed these fabulous tales of queers of old. If there's any that you would like to hear about in future, feel free to tell us in the comments. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll come up with some more spectacular, outrageous stories for next year.
And I'll probably butcher the names next year as well, because I'll never learn my lesson.
What do you mean? They were all so accurate. They were just spot on. But
Oh,
enough of looking at the past. Let's look to the future. What is happening next time?
well, what I see when I look into the future for next time is that we're going back to a topic we've talked about before, which is gatekeeping in the queer community. But with a difference. This time, we're going to do some naming and shaming.
Da, da, da.
Yeah, that's right. It's time for the sinners of the LGBT community, the gatekeepers.
I wonder who's going to be on the naughty list. You'll have to tune in next time to find out.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and make sure you leave us a comment wherever you're listening because we need you to feed the algorithm gods.
Oh, no. And if you're interested in following us on any of our other socials, we will leave links to those down in the description below.
And with all that said, I think we can now do the final bit, which is we did the thing.
We did the thing. We did the thing. We did the thing. We did the thing. We did the thing.
We did the thing. Let's get on out of here. Ooh.